Good afternoon and welcome to the glorious Dallas, Texas, here ahead of a massive night of boxing Saturday night. Canelo Alvarez against Billy Joe Saunders, huge unification, 168-pound matchup. 70,000 people joining us in the AT&T Stadium. The atmosphere is going to be electric. Delighted to be joined firstly by Mikey Garcia, Chris Algieri. Chris, I'll start with you. This matchup, Billy Joe Saunders has been walking around with plenty of swag this week. He's the kind of guy that I don't think will fear the atmosphere, will fear the opportunity. How do you see this matchup playing out?
You know, I think you're absolutely right about Billy Joe Saunders. You know, the thing about him with all this trash talk, all that confidence, all that swagger, that's not an act. That's the way he is. I think he'd be the same way if they were playing hoops or shooting pool or whatever they're going to do. That's just the way that it is. He's highly confident. He's highly capable. And this makes this matchup an extremely dangerous fight for Canelo Alvarez.
People talk about the Trout fight and the Lara fight and the Mayweather fight. Canelo's been quite sort of dismissive of those fights, saying that was 8 years ago. I'm a much different fighter. I guess what it comes down to as well is the levels of Billy Joe Saunders. Once you start breaking down the resume, he's undefeated, two-weight world champion. But if you look at the actual resume, best wins being Andy Lee in a close fight, really a masterclass against David Lemieux. Can he mix it with the pound-for-pound greatness of Canelo Alvarez?
You know, and I agree with what Canelo says. He is a different guy. He's a different fighter now. His style has changed. He's matured. He's really come into himself. And I really do think he's streaking through his prime right now. But Billy Joe Saunders is different than those fighters that you had mentioned. He's bigger. He's undefeated. That O can tell you a lot about a fighter. He's always found a way to dig deep and find a way to win, and this is another opportunity for him to do that.
What does he have to do in this fight? I mean, he's very intelligent, isn't he? He finds a way to set traps on Billy Joe Saunders. We know Billy Joe Saunders is going to be moving. He's going to be very sharp in the fight as well. Do you get the feeling that Billy Joe Saunders is going to take these early rounds in this fight, and then from there, you mustn't give too many rounds away because Canelo will be chasing it? But I guess as well, the question mark is, can Billy Joe Saunders stand up to the punch power and particularly the body work of Canelo?
You know, one thing going for Billy Joe Saunders, many things going for him, but especially is his defense. He doesn't get hit that much, so that dealing with the power of Canelo, that can offset that somewhat. But I think he needs to start fast. He's got to go out there, set the tone, let Canelo know. Billy Joe can punch. He's known as a boxer. He's got a great jab, but he's a physically strong guy. He's a larger man than a lot of the past opponents of Canelo. He's got to go out there, look to make it a tactical fight, but assert his physicality in the fight as well. And I really think it's going to come down to the last 4 rounds to decide who's going to win this fight.
Mikey, intriguing fight, incredible atmosphere, Cinco de Mayo weekend, 5,000 at the weigh-in tomorrow, 70,000 people in there. Expecting a great atmosphere on Saturday.
Oh, it's going to be electrifying, really. It's going to be amazing just to see so many fans. You know, I think the energy from the audience is going to be terrific, being that this is the first big, huge event, you know, after the whole pandemic and everything starting to go back to normal. I think people are just going to be so excited to be there, and that's going to transfer onto the fighters. I think that's what's going to feed off of the fighters. The fighters are going to feed off of them and back and forth, and it's going to create for a much better fight.
You're backing Canelo Alvarez in this fight? I mean, a lot of people say it's a difficult style, but, you know, he's very, very confident, Canelo. You know, I've spoken to him a number of times about this fight. He really sees himself being victorious in there.
I think it's a very good matchup. You know, we've always said styles make fights, you know, and this is one of those perfect fights. You know, Saunders is a great boxer. He is undefeated. You know, I like the confidence. I like that energy, that attitude that he presents, that he's bringing. And that shows me that he's ready and he feels that he's going to win this fight. He's confident. But at the same time, I look at Canelo, very, very straight face. He knows what he's here to do. He's been here before. He's here to get his work done, get a job done. You know, he says it's just another day in the office, you know, Saturday night for him. So when I see both, you know, I just see that both fighters are hitting the best peak of their career, and they want to show it and display it on Saturday night. I think Canelo will win. I think his experience, you know, being that he's been in there many times, and, you know, he has improved so much more in the last maybe 5 or 6 fights than what I did see in the past. I think all that is going to help him win on Saturday night. But it's going to be a complicated fight for Canelo also.
Seen a different kind of dynamic in this build-up. Kind of Billy Joe's come over, it hasn't really given Canelo any respect. You know, you see a lot of guys that are almost beaten before they get in the ring. They're thankful for the opportunity. People have asked me from the British media, do I think Canelo Alvarez is rattled by Billy Joe Saunders? You probably know him better than me, Canelo Alvarez. You know, I mean, I think that he certainly wants to do damage to Billy Joe Saunders, and I guess he mustn't be too keen to do that against Billy Joe because he's got to get his timing right. You saw against David Lemieux, he was almost hyped up. He was forcing his work and he was sloppy. So Canelo's got to be patient in there. But, you know, do you expect Canelo to be a little bit rattled by a little bit of kind of disrespect from Billy Joe Saunders?
I think Canelo sees all this right now, the fight week, you know, energy and attitude by Billy Joe Saunders as an opportunity to show him on Saturday night, you know, who the better man is and try to punish him a little bit more. But he does have to be very patient. Billy Joe ain't no walk in the park. He's not just another opponent. You know, you mentioned other opponents coming into the fight almost beaten already, you know, and so thankful for giving that opportunity. Billy Joe ain't an opponent. He's a world champion, you know, undefeated world champion who sees a huge opportunity in front of him, you know, and I do like the confidence and the attitude that Billy Joe has right now. You know, that's how a champion should feel right now. You know, that you're about to make history and show everybody that, you know, you're as good as anyone has ever, you know, stepped foot inside that ring. So I like that, but I still feel that Canelo will take his time, start working his way, maybe somewhere mid-fight in the 5th, 6th round, start picking up the pace a little bit, and as the rounds go on, he'll start to dominate more and more of the fight.
Well, before we swap you out with Dan Rafael, quick update on you. I know we're going to catch up tomorrow as well. The frustration around the Manny Pacquiao fight,
yes,
you know,
yes.
That's definitely one you want next if you can get it.
That's definitely the fight that we've been, you know, looking for, that we've been actually searching and trying to secure. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get there. There's been a few proposals shot out my way. Nothing concrete, nothing solid. If that doesn't happen, then I'm ready to move on. I told you
147 or 140 or you
40, 47. I mean, I'm just ready to get back in the ring. You know, I can find a guy at 140, or we can do something at 147. We know some of the guys at 140 are willing to move up.
Chris Algieri going at 142. I mean, I know you like each other,
go,
but you never know, right?
You know, I'm ready to get back in the ring. That's what I'm excited for. I just want to get back in the ring, get a fight this summer, and maybe that'll set me up for something even bigger by the end of the year.
Well, if you can jump out and let Dan Rafael jump in. Thanks, Mikey. Dan, come in, mate. Well, welcome back, Dan. Welcome back. What's it been, 14 months or something since you've been here? And great to see you back. Great to see you back. And a massive event, massive crowd. One to get excited about.
It's a huge event, and I'm a little surprised only because even though Billy Joe may be well known in the UK, he's certainly not known here in the United States or in Texas. But I think it's a perfect storm. You're in a situation where you have so many people who are just so excited and hungry and desperate to go to a sporting event, a big event, and Canelo is very popular, and you put it all together, people are just dying to get out there. I mean, there have been other fights where if they were able to have more capacity, they would have been able to draw larger crowds. I've been dying to get out to a fight for quite a while, and I'm super thrilled that my friends at the Ring Magazine were able to work it out to send me out here to do this event. This will be the 6th fight at Cowboy Stadium, AT&T Stadium. Canelo's previous fight in 2016 against Liam Smith, that was the previous record for attendance. That was like 51, high 51s. This is going to just blow that away, and that was bigger than the 2 Pacquiao fights and the 2 Errol Spence fights. As I said to you this morning, that'll be the 2nd largest crowd for a boxing event that I've ever been to, and I've been doing this for over 20 years. The biggest one was your other mega fight in the UK when Anthony Joshua stopped Vladimir Klitschko in their heavyweight championship fight at Wembley with 90,000. So, I never thought I would be this excited for a Billy Joe Saunders fight. Let's be honest.
You've sort of had you had a little bit of a fallout with Billy Joe over the years, haven't you, as well? Do you give him a shot in this fight? I mean, taking away the back and forth between the two of you. I mean, he seems very confident.
I mean, I don't let that sort of stuff ever. Whatever personal issues may arise between a journalist and a boxer or any athlete, that never clouds my judgment on who I think can win. And so I respect Billy Joe Saunders as a boxer for sure. He's a talented guy. He's got a lot of good skills. He was an Olympian. He's undefeated. He's been a champion in 2 weight divisions. He's got some solid wins on his record. And so when I look at the fight, though, when I pick against anybody, this is not in any way a negative towards Saunders. I just feel like Canelo at this stage of his career is fighting at such another level compared to these other fighters at middleweight, super middleweight, and even most of the light heavyweights. I'll never use the word unbeatable. I always say to people, look, I saw Iron Mike Tyson get knocked out by Buster Douglas, so anything is possible. But it's hard to legitimately, in my mind, pick Saunders to win the fight because I just don't think he has enough weapons to overcome the tremendous number of weapons that Canelo Alvarez has. It's you never say never, and you hope you put on a good show, but I have a hard time, especially this is Canelo's house. Not that they say the judges are going to do anything untoward, but they're human beings. They're going to sometimes be swayed, in certain situations. He's just got everything against him. But if he can turn it into masterclass, you never know.
Chris, do you take anything from the mind games of Billy Joe Saunders? They like to do it. You saw Tyson Fury of the same mould do a great job on Vladimir Klitschko. He's almost beaten before he got into the ring as well. You think Canelo a bit long in the tooth for that, or a little bit irate? Feels like normally he's not getting the respect from Billy Joe Saunders that he wants?
I think any other boxer or super middleweight out there at this level would be deterred by this or would be rattled by what Billy Joe brings to the table. But this is what Billy Joe always does, like I said earlier. But I don't see Canelo being rattled by this. I think that he is 100% a professional, ready to go. He's focused. You can see him this week. He looks like he's ready to fight, just like he always does. I don't think he's really rattled by this. But I do think, like Mikey said earlier, he's going to put a little more hurt if he can in some of those shots against Billy Joe on Saturday night.
And when you're faced with the prospect of a mover like Billy Joe, someone with great speed and great ability to move and a smart thinker as well, what does Canelo Alvarez have to do? We see the way he's cutting off his opponents in the last couple of years. Sensational. He's got to do that. He's got to try and make a dent early in Billy Joe Saunders, try and slow those feet down as well.
Yeah, I think what you said early is the key. He's got to get to him early. He's got to show that defensive wizardry that he has isn't going to hold up against the offense and the counterpunching of Canelo. He's done such a great job at making his movement and his punch selection so efficient. Canelo used to move a lot more than he does now. Now he's a lot more of a stalker, making the ring very, very small. And when he has the opportunity and the room to do it, he lets his hands go in combination. Makes him a very, very difficult guy to deal with. So he's got to get to him early and just break Saunders down. Like I said earlier, I think the last quarter of this fight, those last 4 rounds, is really going to be indicative of who's going to take the fight.
And Dan, obviously coming off the back of the pandemic, you've been not at these shows like you normally are. It's going to be good fun for you and exciting for the sport of boxing that the world is opening back up. The biggest live event since the pandemic, the biggest indoor event of all time in US boxing history, and great that boxing's able to do that, isn't it, in such an iconic stadium?
I totally agree with you, and I think part of it is because of the popularity of Canelo. I think it's
a bit of a phenomenon, isn't he?
He really is. I
always say similar to AJ in terms of drawing power. There's not really anyone like those two in their respective territories.
I totally agree. They are, some Brits may say AJ's the biggest star. Some of the non-Brits may say Canelo's the biggest star. The fact is they're both megastars, and they can draw crowds anywhere. I mean, look, when Anthony Joshua came to America, he sold out Madison Square Garden. Now, I know a lot of those were British fans that made the trip over, but that's still the people in the seats is still what matters, that you can have those folks travel. But in terms of the magnitude of the event, it doesn't take a lot to understand. Even if you don't really know Saunders, you look at the record, undefeated, he's a champion. Canelo talks about trying to make history as the first ever undisputed world champion at 168 pounds. To do that, he's got to win this fight because there's one more step afterwards. It's just a very good matchup, and Canelo's fighting at such a high level. And I think another thing, by the way, that cannot be lost, and I wish other fighters, especially the elite fighters, would follow and do the same thing that Canelo is doing. There's something to be said for activity. Canelo's been in our minds now every day for like 6 months because he's fought so often. And even when he's not fighting, there's another fight that he's on the schedule or about to be scheduled. So when you get in the ring and you get the build up to the Callum Smith fight, and 30 seconds after the fight's over, he's back in February, even if it wasn't a huge fight because of the opponent. And then in the ring after that fight, you're announcing a fight between him and Billy Joe. I mean, how can you beat that? So he's in our consciousness on a daily basis. And if you're just not a boxing fan, but just a sports fan, inevitably you're going to hear about the fact that, Canelo Alvarez is fighting again. He's fighting more than anybody. It's funny. I did a story this week. I don't know if you read it. I wrote about your young prospect, Mark Castro, junior lightweight, very outstanding amateur, 2-0 as a professional. And I was one of the reasons that prompted me to decide to write that article. What are the chances that a kid would be 21 years old fighting for the third time when guys are fighting usually at that early stage of their career, pretty much like every couple of months, every month, every 6 weeks, that he's going to have 3 fights in quick succession, all on Canelo Alvarez undercards? So that was sort of like the intrigue to me. And so I talked to him about it and learned that he had idolized Canelo and was so thrilled to be on the card. I got to know him a little bit with his father when they went down to train in his camp when he was an amateur. But the point is, the activity that Canelo was undertaking right now is a testament to him. And, he's like, I know I'm in my prime. I got to get it done now. Let me go out there and win all the big fights and make all the money. And that's what he's doing.
Yeah, good to see the elite fighters so active. Dan, thank you. We'll see you at ringside on Saturday. John Ryder, if you can just jump in and pass the mic over to John. We'll get John in here. Johnny, how are you, mate?
I'm good. Thanks for
Well,
having me on.
come over here. Really, just to keep your face in the mix, of course. Got that big fight coming up with David Morrell for the WBA regular title. You have kind of like been on unofficial standby this week, and you've also shared the ring with Billy Joe Saunders as well. Great matchup, great occasion. Looking forward to it, and should be an intriguing fight.
Yeah, massive fight. Obviously, the arena behind us is a great stage for such a big event, and Billy Joe Saunders made the pinnacle of his career now.
Obviously, you faced Billy Joe. It was a while ago. Fight that could have gone either way. You feel that Canelo will have too much for him? I know that, having conversations with yourself and Tony Sims, both rate Billy Joe Saunders very highly, but also feel that Canelo is a standout pound-for-pound number one.
Canelo's career talks for itself, and going on opponents, then Canelo's head and shoulders above. But we all know what Billy Joe can do. He's a naturally gifted boxer who's probably technically one of the best boxers we've ever seen come out of Britain. But his work ethic's not always matched his talent, and I think that's let him down in the past. But I mean, his recent change in team and bringing people on board, he looks sensational. He looks in great shape, and you've got to give him a chance.
Just a point on that, Chris. Obviously, you're big on nutrition, big on preparation. It's that thing about, a fighter that hasn't always lived a life, but all of a sudden has a really great 16-week camp. Does that mean that ready for a night like this, if you haven't lived that life consistently, can you just turn it around in a 14, 16-week period?
So normally I would say no, but Billy Joe has never been. I mean, he's a boxer. Generally, boxers almost need to be in better shape than punchers because they have to move around the ring. They usually end up going the distance. They're used to going 10, 12 rounds. Billy Joe's one of those guys. He has faded late in fights before, but now if he's doing everything that he should be doing in order to be at the highest level, we might see a different level of conditioning out of Billy Joe Saunders tonight, or on Saturday night.
John, obviously you faced Billy Joe. What do you think Canelo has to do in this fight after you shared 12 rounds with him? I mean, it's obviously about cutting off the ring, trying to get hold of Billy Joe Saunders, because he's going to be super elusive in there.
Yeah, I think we've seen throughout Billy Joe's career that he builds up an early lead. Majority of his career has been 6-7 rounds up, and he's often faded in later rounds, like Chris said. But I think Canelo's got to match him early doors and not let him get that lead, and otherwise it's going to make for a long night. And I mean, we don't want to see it go to the scorecards and Billy Joe get it over. We want to see a fair fight, and I can see it going into later rounds and maybe Canelo catching him.
Obviously for yourself, WBA regular title, world title coming up. Looks like the end of June against David Morrell. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Morrell, 3-0 now as a professional. Kind of a little bit of an unknown. We know he's a super talent as well. But what have you seen with Tony when you look at David Morrell?
Well, I mean, I think 4-0 he is now.
4-0.
The extra fight makes a big difference. Listen, he's from the Cuban national team, so he's got skills to pay the bills, do you know what I mean? But inexperience of the pro rounds, which I've got in spades now, so I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I can go in there and old man him.
How do you guys feel about that, like facing a prospect? Because when we have young prospects coming through, particularly from Eastern Europe or in this case Cuba, I think guys like sort of look at those records and say, why would I mean, this fight's been mandated by the WBA, but as a seasoned pro, you don't really want to go in and face a guy who's got a 3-0, 4-0 record. We know he's got ability and he's a world champion, but it's quite. I often find sort of fighters and managers say, no, why would we fight them?
Yeah, the risk versus reward ratio on that, it's different than another fight. If you win, okay, great. You're supposed to win. You have more experience. You have a much bigger resume as a professional. You move on. But if you lose to a guy that we don't know how good he is yet. We may find out a couple fights later that he's world class and he's going to be one of the best fighters I've ever seen. But you still lost to him early in the career when at that time people saw that and didn't understand what they were seeing.
Well, thank you to Chris Algieri, John Ryder. Not long to go now. Massive night this Saturday, live on DAZN from the AT&T Stadium, just over there. 70,000 people ahead for a huge unification fight. WBC, WBA Ring Magazine champion, pound-for-pound number one, Canelo Alvarez takes on the two-weight world champion, undefeated 30-0, WBO king, Billy Joe Saunders. Wherever you are on Saturday night, do not miss this. We'll see you soon.